Pystyyköhän joku sanomaan, että kuuluuko mun ääneni johonkin tämän huoneen ulkopuolella? Hyvin kuuluu tänne ainakin, ja omaan korvaan kuuluu sen verran, että ilmeisesti joku laite on päällä. Toivottavasti myös tuonne striimin päähän. Hyvä, loistavaa. Kello on 1:30 ja aloitellaan Turun Eurooppa-foorumin liikennepoliittista keskustelua. Ja mehän käydään tämä keskustelu sitten englannin kielellä ihan siitä syystä, että meillä on kansainvälisiä vieraita täällä, mutta sanon muutaman käytännön asian tässä alkuun suomeksi, koska olettaisin, että yleisöstä varmaan melkein kaikki olette suomenkielisiä, turkulaisia ja muualta Suomesta. Mun nimi on Marjo Uotila ja mä olen Pohjoisen kasvuvyöhykkeen yhteistyöverkoston yhteysjohtaja, ja Pohjoinen kasvuvyöhyke käytännössä on se alue Etelä-Suomessa, josta tässä puhutaan, E18-moottoritien varsi Satakunnasta Rantakaistaleen kautta Etelä-Karjalaan. Ja toimin tämän tilaisuuden moderaattorina ja toivon, että lähetätte viestiseinän kautta kommentteja tai kysymyksiä panelisteille. Otetaan ne myöhemmässä vaiheessa sitten yhdellä kertaa valikoidusti esiin ja esitetään panelisteillemme. Ja viestiseinähän toimii sillä lailla, että sovelluskaupasta käytte lataamassa Eurooppa-foorumin sovelluksen ja siellä löytyy viestiseinäkohta. Ja käytännön asioista vielä sen verran, että tilaisuushan striimataan suorana nettiin. Toivottavasti onnistun pitämään myös striimin päässä olijat tässä hyvin kartalla tässä keskustelussa. Ja striimin päässä tietysti voi myös osallistua kysymyksiin tämän viestiseinän kautta. But now I think I switched into English to be considerate with our esteemed panelists who are not Finnish by mother tongue, not at least not all of you. My name is Marjo Uotila, and I'm the moderator for this panel. I'm the director of Strategic Alliances of the Northern Growth Zone Collaboration Network. That's Pohjoinen kasvuvyöhyke in Finnish, which stretches along the southern Finland, the area that we are discussing today. And this area in Finland belongs to the European Core Network Corridor, the Scandinavian-Mediterranean corridor, with major export ports to support the Finnish exports and imports, Finnish industry in that sense. Also, this area of southern Finland covers more than 50% of Finnish population, more than 50% of Finnish GDP, and around 60% of the investments of the national investments to research, development, and innovation. Also, I'd like to point out that the Northern Growth Zone, i.e. the southern Finland, has 75% of Finnish maritime cluster, which means that that's a very important, that has a very important role in the Finnish economy. Also, the lifeline of this area is the E18 motorway, which connects us also to the European networks as such. This area also has the main airports, especially the main hub in Finland, Helsinki-Vantaa, and also the Kouvola railroad connection, which connects Finland via Russia to the Chinese market, which is also a very interesting current initiative. But I think that we can start the panel, and I'd like to ask our mayor, the mayor of Turku, Minna Arve, to say some first words to introduce why Turku is at the core of this discussion.
Hello, everyone. I would warmly like to thank you and welcome our guests who are taking part to this panel, but also big thank you all who are here present, choosing this discussion instead of sunshine. It's quite amazing. Thank you for coming, and all the people, all the public who is behind the stream, also very much welcome to this discussion, which is about transportation and the networks and the connectivity, and why Finland and Turku and the area of Turku region is so important discussion today. So first of all, I would like to mention that this occasion is part of Eurooppa-foorumi, which started today. This is the second time we are organizing in Turku the Eurooppa-foorumi, which is the forum for EU-related issues. We're discussing in all levels between the research community, between the decision makers, between the citizens organizations and citizens as such, and then of course the economic and business communities. So this event is one part of that 3-day occasion called Turku Europe Forum. There are over 50 events during these 3 days, so I hope that there will be a lot of discussion and many interesting topics, and maybe some of you are taking part of some other forums and discussions as well, but today we are discussing transport issues. And we are discussing them, of course, from the European perspective, but not only from the European perspective, a little bit of Finnish and this region perspective, Nordic perspective, why it's important for the Nordic countries also to connect better to the Europe. And of course, I have a special interest in Turku and Turku area. While the urbanization is something which is today more it's even ongoing phenomena. So it means that the role of the cities and city regions is growing all the time. And many of the big goals which we are setting on the national level are actually put into effort in city level. Taking example of the climate change challenges, so there are national level, in European level we have quite ambitious goals, but on city level we have even actually more ambitious goals, and in addition to that, we have maybe a little bit more tools to make those goals into action actually. And transportation is one of the biggest concrete actions what we need to do here in Turku, but how we can actually affect on the national level also for the carbon emissions. But coming back to Turku and Turku region, southwestern Finland, we all know here the present and maybe some of the other persons behind the stream and here have also heard that the economic boom actually, which we can say that in this area has been quite ongoing for a couple of years already, means that we have a very strong businesses in different fields, and one of the biggest companies in this sector, thinking about on the importance wise also connected to the transportation, is maritime industry as a whole, and the network, and of course the Turku shipyard, the Meyer Turku shipyard. And we know that they are having their order books full till 2025 or so, and we know also that they haven't closed their sales office yet or sales function, so they are really working onward of that too. We know that Valmet Automation is having a car factory in Uusikaupunki. They are all the time seeking for the new labor and also speaking about the battery future of the cars in Salo and how that could be included to this area's success story. And of course the more traditional industries also like pharmaceutical and diagnostic industries, which are really important to this area as well. And of course there we are speaking about the wide network, but also big companies like Bayer and Orion and Wallach, of course. So what this actually mean in this related to this discussion, why I'm thinking about it and speaking about it, is that all these companies and their networks are all the time seeking for the skillful workers. and that there is a growing need for that. We need thousands and thousands new workers to come to work in this area, and that's why it's so important how this area is reachable. So that's why also these connectivity issues are so important for our region, and we need to improve the connectivity within this area and Europe in wider perspective, and how to commute within Finland and between countries. And at the same time, I was already mentioning that Turku City also has a very ambitious goals for the carbon neutrality, which practically means that we are having the goal to be the carbon neutral city by 2029, what is the year when Turku will be celebrating its 800 years anniversary also, and while knowing also that the transportation is really one of the main CO2 emission producers, so we have to really think about these issues. And then I have a solution, at least one of those, and this is the 1-hour train between Helsinki and Turku, which would improve the connectivity within Finland. Of course, we are discussing these CO2 emissions, and that would be an excellent solution for the both challenges. So that would mean that the train connection, we are speaking about 1-hour train connection. When we would do the new railway connection, it was actually gives the possibility to that be even quicker, depending of the operator and what kind of trains they are operating. But this is the practicality within the moment, and it would mean that 1.5 million people would be available, kind of working within the same area. So it actually makes the southern part of Finland much more closer to each other from the different parts of southern Finland. So this is the Turku perspective, a Finnish perspective, but then coming to the little bit further away, the European scale. So Turku actually connects the Stockholm area from the west, and from the east side, of course, St. Petersburg area, and that's very, very important that we have the big markets on both sides. And it can really be said that Turku is actually a gateway to Europe. And while we are having the historical ties between Sweden and especially with the Stockholm area, it's really nice to have a discussion also included how we can actually make it more concrete today, and what are the advantages of that. We know everyone that we have a daily ferry connections many times per day between Turku and Stockholm at the moment. Both harbors are very important for the both areas, and there are daily flights between the Stockholm and Turku, and that's why also we see that this 1-hour train would actually improve the connectivity between Turku area and Stockholm area in that sense, making the area of Turku even bigger when you're watching from the other side, a little bit, making this kind of perspective here too. So I'm coming to the end of my little bit pre-speech here, or how I see the things are coming here. So it's not only about the 1-hour train, fast rail connections. We are including all different mobility hubs, ports, airports, railways into this discussion, and hearing more the perspectives of different panelists. And of course, we are not forgetting the motorway we have between Helsinki and Turku at the moment, which is already going further on to the east. So important, Finland is an island actually, and for Finland it's most important to have good connections internationally, and while we are so large country, we need to have a good connections within the country, and that's why the transportation issues are maybe even more important for us than they are for many others. But thank you for this, and I hope we are going to have very good and interesting discussions.
Thank you very much, Anna, for the introduction and for the Turku and Southwest Finland perspective to the topic of strengthening southern Finland as the gateway to Europe. I'd like to introduce our panelist next, and just a reminder that please also tweet from this occasion. The best parts should be tweeted, and use the hashtags Eurooppa-forum or Eurooppa-foorumi, or Turku, or kasvuvyöhyke, or whatever else you feel suitable. I'd like to introduce or give the floor to Mr. Philippe Chantren, who has come to Finland from European Commission. He's the Deputy Head of Unit of DG Move, responsible for transport issues. But I leave the floor to you to introduce yourself a little bit, and please first tell us how you came to Turku. Was it easy, or was Finland accessible? Was Turku accessible?
So, thank you very much.
This is not a paid commercial, by the way.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here. My name is Philippe Chantren. I'm coming from the European Commission, the Director General for Transport and Mobility, where I am the Deputy Head of Unit of a unit which is busy with transport infrastructure, and this is called 10T policy in our jargon, but it's basically about connecting the member states and the infrastructure networks of the individual member states to create a European network. I came here by plane. I had to stop in Helsinki, and I was quite surprised to have to take a second plane for a 150-kilometer distance, but it was enjoyable as I could see the coastline. But in times where we speak about decarbonization, this is of course maybe not the right way to go forward.
I think we should have a slide, by the way, your slide.
Do you want me already to?
Maybe this one. Maybe you can say a few words
Yes.
regarding the map.
I can, of course, introduce a bit of what we are doing, because you might wonder why Europe is busy with transport infrastructure at all. Now, for a long time, member states or still continue to think about transport only from a national perspective. So, big cities in a country are normally well connected, but as soon as it is about cross-border connections, it gets very difficult, even in a Europe which is united since quite some time. This is due because there are missing links, because there are bottlenecks. Sometimes it's due because the technical parameters of the infrastructure are not the same. Trains cannot run simply over the border because the traffic guidance systems are different in different countries, etc. So here we have made a major change of policy in 2013 by devising the 10T policy. And the first reflection was we need to have a network which really connects all the regions of Europe. And we devised this based on a methodology which ensured that all regions, and by that all citizens and all undertakings in Europe, have access to this network, which will enable them to benefit really of the freedoms of Europe in terms of traveling, in terms of making business, because without transport infrastructure, the economy will not flow. So, if you, the other map first, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
No, the one before. Yes,
This
here.
one. Yes.
Here you
Very
see
good.
the map of this network that has been then agreed upon with the member states and the European Parliament in 2013. And the thin lines you see are going into all regions. This is the comprehensive network, as we call it. But then we said, okay, we have to focus our actions on the most important parts. The most important urban nodes in all the member states, the most important cross-border points to third countries, the most important ports. And based on this, we established the core network, which you see here with the thicker lines. And for instance, you see that the link between Turku and Helsinki, two urban nodes of the core network, is one thick line, hence belonging to the core network. Second of all, we of course said this core network has to comply with certain standards, technical standards, to make sure that everything can flow freely on this network. And we said if we do this, we have to do it together. And doing it together means we have to have a common time framework. So in 2013 it was agreed that by 2030 all member states work together to establish this core network up to the standards, so that there is not only the benefit of each single project, but that you have the benefit of all the projects working together, having really a network effect, and thereby giving better benefit to the investments that have been done. So once this was agreed in 2013, of course, this was not sufficient because things don't happen magically. We then had two main implementation tools, tools to make sure that that there is progress in the implementation of this network. The first one is now the next map, that is the core network corridors. So again, on the core network, we identified where the main projects were lying, the missing links, and devised these 10 corridors. And you see the pink one, which is the Scandinavian Mediterranean corridor that was already referred to, which comes down from Malta all the way up through the middle of Europe and reaches Finland and then continues also towards the Russian border. The core network corridors are there to bring different stakeholders together. The member states along these corridors, but also the regions, the cities, the infrastructure managers, the ports, the airports, all these people meet together, and it is in many cases the first time that they actually meet and discuss together to see what is happening actually on the other side of the border, what are you doing in terms of infrastructure developments, what traffic flows do you expect, what impact will that have on me, etc., etc. This is done under the leadership of core network coordinators. Mr. Pat Cox is the coordinator for the Scandinavian Mediterranean corridor, and I think, at least here from the panel side, most of you have been in contact with Mr. Cox on this. A second implementation tool is, of course, money. So we have the Connecting Europe facility, which is a European program which foresees investments into transport infrastructure, but also energy infrastructure and telecom infrastructure. For the period 2014 to 2020, these were 22 billion euros. And we invest, of course, there where Europe has to intervene to make things move. And again, this is mainly on the cross-border links. It is mainly on the bottlenecks. It is mainly on interoperability issues, etc. So we have already invested a lot in that sense. And we are using the money very efficiently, because if projects are not progressing as they are supposed to progress, then we take the money back out of the program and we are ready to re-inject in other projects that might go faster. So this is now the end of the period. We are approaching 2020, so we are reusing this money, and the projects have to compete for the money. We are really looking for the best projects where there is, first of all, maturity, where the project can progress quickly, where there's support of the stakeholders, support of the member state, and also where there's a need to progress quickly because the project itself makes a lot of sense. I stop here with the general introduction about European policies, and I hope I was not too technical.
No, you were not too technical. Maybe I should stress that I've specifically asked the panelists not to be too technical, because I know that we as an audience are not the specific experts in the European Union or even Finnish TEN-T policy issues, and we should try to keep the level of conversation at an understandable level. So I think you made it excellently. Thank you. And now that we are on one of the 9 major European corridors here in Turku and in southern Finland, and our connections with the Nordic countries, especially with the Stockholm region in Sweden, are traditionally very, very strong, and we want to make them even stronger. I'd like to introduce Maria Nimviksten, who is the Secretary General of, let's say, a sister organization for my organization in the Stockholm-Mälar region, and you are also part of the Scandinavian Mediterranean Core Network Corridor. So we are actually already on the same, dealing with the same issues in transport and other issues. But I won't say more about where you come from. You can introduce yourself a little bit more. And you also have a slide or a few slides. Thank you. That's good.
Yes. Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me and for inviting us. I have a colleague at the front end here, Johan, and so we would like to continue the conversation afterwards if anyone would be interested in hearing more about our work in the Stockholm-Mälar region.
And
So
did you fly
I
to Turku?
I was thinking, how did I get here? We actually got, of course, on the plane because it was very convenient and very quick. So we had a smooth flight coming here. 30 minutes, I think. more or
Across the very beautiful archipelago. The
Very
most beautiful archipelago in the world.
It is. It is.
That's paid.
So so it was very smooth, I would say. So I would like to start with saying a little bit about what we call in Swedish we call it Mälardalsrådet. In English it's called the Council for the Stockholm-Mälar region, and we are a platform, and I'll come back to that shortly. But just to give you an idea, Mario was introducing the Northern Growth Zone and with your figures, key figures, and here are some of our key figures telling a little bit about the region that we are from. And we are about 4.3 million people living in this Stockholm-Mälar region. So it's almost the same figures as in the Northern Growth Zone. Almost half of the GDP is being created in this region. Half of all the housing is being built in this Stockholm-Mälar region. And we have more than half of the universities located. And so just as in your case, we are a very important part of the growth of Sweden and the development. And of course, we would like to have that shown also in the investments in infrastructure and, well, different aspects that are needed to keep this area grow. One of our key figures, which is very important in Sweden, and I guess you can translate that to you, but 8 out of 10 train trips in Sweden actually start or end in Stockholm. So 8 out of 10, which means that if anything goes wrong in the Stockholm area, that would have effects on the whole country, actually. So that's why we need a lot of good infrastructure. But we also, of course, look outside the borders, but that is more within the country. And if I could get the next picture or slide. Yes, thank you. So the Council for the Stockholm-Mälar region is a platform for the politicians. So we gather the politicians in a consensus-based strategic work together. So we have all the political parties represented in our board, and the picture showing is the new board. It was elected in May this year, so it's very new, hasn't had its first meeting yet. We'll have that in September. Our chair is Mr. Christopher Tamsons. He is politicians from the Stockholm region, dealing with public transport mainly. So the members of the Mälardalsrådet is municipalities and counties. So 60 municipalities and 8 counties are members of this platform. And it's completely voluntary. It's because people then believe in the idea of doing something bigger together and taking these strategic discussions and then try and get together and unite a vision together and then put that forward to the government, to the national level, but also the international level, which is something that has become more important to us during the last years. And typically, infrastructure and transport are the backbone. A lot of Mälardalsrådet was founded already in 1992, so it's almost 30 years, not quite, but it's not soon. And it was founded because the politicians wanted to facilitate for people to be able to work within that region, to find jobs, to find housing, and so on. But now it has also been more and more important to become active in the Nordic and international level. So we can come back to that. We have some connections east and westwards. So yes, so as an introduction.
Yes, thank you. So we have many common issues and also similar things that have worked in the background for us both to become a network within our countries.
Sorry, could I add one thing? I think I have another slide, which is more or less the core of what we do in the Stockholm region. Well, not that one, the other one. There.
Oh.
It's about people. So what our politicians manage to do is to come together and to actually focus on what is common strategic goals and not so much political discussions. So we try and together with really good reports, together with good background material, strategic reports, have them agree on really important issues. And when they agree, which they have done previously successfully for many years now, although people have been changing, the politicians have been coming and going, they managed to agree on quite strategic documents. So I brought one here just as an example. This is our most important document, a report. It's on the table there. It's in Swedish. I'm sorry about that, but but
Well,
still.
I would perhaps make a very bold statement that most of us can read Swedish.
Oh.
I would say. I would
Wonderful.
promise that. So if any one of you is interested in how things are operating in our sister region in Stockholm-Mälar, then feel free to take a copy for yourself.
So that's one of the success factors, that we actually managed to agree. So every fourth year we managed to agree on a strategic document that is then being put forward to the national level, but also now is our statements towards the ScanMed and the TNT revision. So no matter how politicians change positions and so on, and the parties change their majority of position and so on, they managed to stick to the strategic long-term goals. So that is one of the most important success factors.
Very important in Finland as well. And I'll use this opportunity to introduce our panelists from the Ministry of Transport and Communications. Mr. Timo Kievari, you're the head of unit at the ministry. Would you like to introduce yourself and how you came to Turku and reflect a little bit from your perspective?
Yes, thank you and good evening everybody. It's really pleasure to be here in it's sunny Turku. I came from the current capital by train and the journey was pleasant. I did some email over there and enjoyed the beautiful scenery. I think it's really easy to relate what is said before here. I think climate change and in our economical prosperity are issues that demand really good action, and I think that all tricks are not anymore viable if we want to and when we want to achieve the goals that we have, whether it comes to sustainability and the carbon neutral or the carbon footprint, whether it comes to the traffic safety, whether it comes to the accessibility or connectivity of our cities and our regions. So it's easy to be on the same page with the previous panelists about that we need to do more in order to make our transport system something that creates good services and good opportunity for our citizens and our businesses to move to the workplaces, go to the services that they need, meet their dear friends and families. So I think that transport is something that is really on the top of the agenda of our political parties at the moment, and I think there's a lot of consensus on that we need to improve our networks, which are forming the base of our transport system. We are talking about physical networks, but also we are talking about digital networks more and more. So it's important to understand that the transport system is changing to be more dependent on digital data and automatization, and we can accomplish something that what we haven't been able to accomplish by harnessing this data. And I think that our maritime cluster is a great example of that. So when it comes to what we do in the ministry, we are currently trying to or doing our best to implement the government program, and the transport issues are on the top of that agenda. There are two main issues that the government program sees that transport system can be developed to answer to which were the climate change and the economical prosperity. We need action, first of all, in national level. We need action in EU level, and of course we need action in bilateral level between our neighboring countries and other countries where we have been connected and will be connected in the future. The main things that my amazing people in my team are responsible is to negotiate with Philip's team about the European regulation and the European programs, namely the 10T network and the evaluation. We are doing our best to provide Commission the best knowledge-based information to evaluate what is the situation at the moment and what could be done in the future. We also are taking part in the negotiation of the EU regulation mentioned earlier, the Connect Europe facility, which is dependent on the EU's multi-annual framework, so to say the EU's budget framework for future. And we are also trying to do our best to make the Connect Europe facility calls to be circulated, and the information about the CEF calls to be circulated among the Finnish companies and the Finnish stakeholders, the cities and the regions, so that they can apply to get the benefit from these European funding programs. And we have been really successful for getting funding for motorway of the sea projects, and our harbors, for example, have been really successful for getting funds back from Europe. So this is what we see in the European level, and we do really see that the core network corridors are something that are really crucial for Finland and Finnish citizens and businesses. So we welcome the Commission's proposal to enlarge or extend the core network corridors from southern Finland also to other parts of Finland. When it comes to the national level, what we are doing at the moment, we are looking closely to our Swedish colleagues in the what they have done in the transport system planning era, and we have the legislation in place which dictates that we have to do our own strategic plan for the transport system development. And this 12-year national transport system plan is something that is on the preparation at the moment, and I don't have a copy yet because it's a piece of paper that we haven't seen yet, but it will be an important piece of policy paper. It's not a piece of paper, but it's a result of dialogue and cooperation between different stakeholders. And this is something that we are responsible for arranging this cooperation, arranging all the discussions, all the cooperation that is needed in order to make it our mutual, and in order this policy paper to increase trust among each other. I think the objectives are the same, that we wanted to create more trust that a transport system is developed in a more holistic and in more long-term perspective. And last of all, I want to mention something that was mentioned by in the first speak by Mrs. Arver, is that investments to rails is something really important also in the Cabinet's program. There is mentioned that capitalization of state-owned company will be done if needed and if the criteria is met that is written in the Cabinet program. This means that if this goes on, the project companies can develop fast connections from Helsinki to Turku and Helsinki onwards to north and from Helsinki to east. And these are something that are on the preparation at the moment as we speak, and it's something that we need to have common ground on, understanding on who wants to join and on what criteria. This is what I wanted to share with you. We do a lot of EU level, a lot of bilateral level, and of course a huge amount of things in national level.
Thank you. I think that we can all agree on welcoming the idea of a longer-term strategic planning, pretty much what Sweden has already been doing for quite a while, this 12-year planning issue, and I think that we all hope that it will be decided and signed and in place. And also, do I take it that you almost promised that the 1-hour train will come through? Also maybe the other directions apart from Turku in the southern Finland?
Yeah, well, maybe I'm not in the positions to make promises, but what I can
I'll
promise...
just make,
Yeah.
this is, you can
Yeah,
sign.
I can sign it. What I can promise is that we take the cabinet program and try to make the most that we can, and our amazing people and our friends in other organizations, that this will be true in future. And there are preparations on the way, and this needs more discussion, but I think that we will see something in the time by the end of the year.
Very good, thank you. And then we have our esteemed member of European Parliament, Henna Virkkunen. Maybe you can share your thoughts on the subject and introduce what you've been up to in the Parliament. You've been in the EU Parliament also before the last elections, and you've been in a very important position related to the transport policy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this seminar. You didn't ask how did I travel
Well,
here.
how did you?
Yeah, I took a train from Jyväskylä. It was 3.5-hour train, and including
That's a
20
long
minutes
train.
coffee break in Tampere.
Yes.
And it was very good way to travel here. Yeah, and why these connections are important from the European perspective? Of course, the main reason is that, as you know, European Union is one single market, one internal market, and of course it's very, very important for our economy and growth that we have good and fast and smart connections inside in European Union, that the people and goods and services, they can travel across the borders. And we have 3 sectors to where we want to invest from the European funds. And of course, one is transport connections. Then we have energy connections and digital connections. And we have one tool how we can also boost the investments in this sector, and it's called Connecting Europe Facility. It's one of the programs and funding programs, and from that program we are funding the most important transport connections, and it means they has to be cross-border connections, which are linking the member states together. And then we are also funding cross-border energy projects and also digital projects. And as we heard from the Commission and from the Ministry, now this current program will go to the end in 2020, and right now we are making decisions about the next program, which will start from 2021 to 2027. 7 years program. So it means that it's part of European budget, which it's called multi-annual financial framework. And right now, member states are negotiating on this MFF, multi-annual financial framework. And of course, it's quite challenging. It's one of the priorities for Finnish presidency. Finland is the president of European Union right now, and Finland has said, and the government, that this will be one of the priorities, that Finland will try to conclude and finalize the negotiations between the member states. In the European Parliament level, we have already decided what we think about the next budget, and we have also decided the text of the next regulation for Connecting Europe Facility. But now, of course, we need to know how much money we will have before we can start with the program. And I think it will be very challenging for Finland to conclude and finalize these negotiations, and it doesn't make it easier that one of the biggest member states, UK, is probably leaving European Union now in few months, and of course it makes much more difficult now to plan the next years and the budget, because we don't know really that how many member states we will have and how they will be funding the European Union projects. But anyway, the main lines, what we wanna fund in the next 7 years from the budget, if we think about the transport sector, climate change will be one of the topics, and it means that 60% of the budget will be used, of the transport budget will be used to that kind of projects where we can cut emissions. And it means that mostly European Union funds, they will go to railway projects, because it's very climate friendly way to transport. Only 1% of the emissions of transport are coming from the railway. So it's very sustainable way to transport people and goods. And that's why we want to support from the European funds very much the railway connections. And as we saw Turku is in good situation because this is one of the core corridors in whole Europe. The corridor that connects Turku to Stockholm and then to Helsinki and to Russian border. And of course now you have also your own important big project there, Tunnin Juna, 1 hour train project. And of course now what is needed to get EU funds for that is that the planning project is going forward in Finnish side. And it's something what the government and parliament has to decide in Finland, that they are committed to do this project and they are willing to start it. And then it will be possible to get 30% of the funding from the EU budget. It's the maximum, 30% of the funding. So now we are more looking for the next budget of the Finnish government and parliament, and we will be looking also that how committed they are to this project, and then it will be possible to get also EU funding for this project. But from the European Union's and Parliament's perspective, we are very much underlining the role of sustainable transport, and it means that the railway connections, they are very much prioritized in next years.
Yes, thank you very much. This was the introductory round, so I'm asking whether any one of the panelists would like to reflect on any of the issues that were said during the first round at this point. Perhaps what you were mentioning, you were building up a little bit of pressure towards the Finnish government, and maybe could our ministry representatives say something about this pressure and what do you suspect will be happening?
Yes, well, first of all, I think it's a window of opportunity at the moment. The momentum is now to do things and change the direction of certain policies. Due to the fact that we have a new era of multi-annual financial framework and new Connect Europe facility program will be drafted and has been drafted and negotiated quite for quite big part as already. Of course, the numbers are something that need to be tackled, as Member of Parliament said, Henna said that it can be done after the budget decisions. But we also are at the moment, there is quite a huge consensus between the Finnish parliamentary parties that we need to invest more into our transport network, and the amount of money that will be put into the maintaining our network, our rail and road network, it's going to be there. It will be 300 million more euros every year from this on, and this money will be used for many purposes, but for investments for greener and more sustainable development of our network as well. So there are budgetary negotiations going on at the moment. I think that we can share you more information on how we will proceed after these negotiations are concluded, and there is a budgetary framework for national budget for the becoming years. But lot of things are going on the way, and we have the momentum at the moment.
Yes. I'd like to ask from the Commission side. I understand that in your speech you mentioned that the core network corridors should be ready by the year 2030. Now it means that there are all the member states have agreed upon certain prioritized projects, pre-identified projects of bottlenecks that should be solved by that year. And of course it's not a cheap thing to accomplish, not in Finland nor in other countries. And in Finland the 1 hour train between, or it's not called the 1 hour train, I think, it's called the fast railway connection between Turku and Helsinki, is one of the pre-identified bottlenecks and projects in this the list of projects that Finland as a member state has put forward. So would you like to reflect on that, how to accomplish the many bottlenecks that we have listed and agreed upon on national level, and how we can accomplish it by 2030?
It's the 1 billion question.
Well, I'm asking
money
but
is not
you as a
the
commission
no, the
person,
there is the common engagement from all member states to achieve this core network by 2030. We are trying to support as much as we can, but obviously we cannot impose a project on a member state. Brussels will never decide on you have to build this here by that. The treaty does not allow. This is never what member states agreed upon. So it's always on the initiative of the member state. But as soon as we get good projects, we are very ready to support them financially. The Connecting Europe facility has been mentioned. There is money there. We have already provided, I think, 180 million euros in the Connecting Europe facility to projects in Finland. And if the projects are good, we are there to support them. Public money, however, is always limited. I already mentioned that there is competition between projects, and we have to find other sources for financing as well. There are the capital markets, private investment, etc. We need to mobilize also this money into transport infrastructure. We are working on that as well to make sure that we get the money mobilized for the infrastructure we need. The challenges that are mentioned here on the Finnish level are exactly the same on European level. We will have a new commission soon in principle, but the new commission president, Ms. Ursula von der Leyen, has already pointed out her agenda, and greening, the Green Deal, I think it's the name, is the first priority. So we will certainly be working on that, and as transport is one of the main contributors to CO2 emissions, there has to be action taken here. This is very clear. But it's all about priorities.
Yes.
And just one more reflection on that. So with we are dependent on the money that will be available also in the next years after 2020. So the negotiations now under the Finnish presidency on this budget for the 7 years is very important, and we hope that the priorities are set there also in a future-looking way. Transport infrastructure is a key to achieve the objectives that we will have as the European Union, so we will also need the money for that. And then we have to prioritize also where we put the money. For instance, maintenance is something that we rarely intervene so far because the challenges are too high, so this is not something where we would normally intervene. This kind of priority setting has to be decided as well.
Yes, thank you. Let me take up the issue of if the projects are good.
Can we leave the people around mentally? That was very nice listening to you, but can we participate as well? For the time, and it's been only a monologue, one-way discussion. Can we talk? Just a question for me now.
Unfortunately, if you don't speak on the microphones, then the people on the stream will not be able to hear. There will be a possibility for audience questions, and I also encourage you to use the viestiseinä and also Twitter while the discussion is going on. But you will be given a microphone when we have the opportunity very soon, I think. But I'd like to point out the fact that the projects must be good. So my understanding is that in Sweden, you have been quite a lot better in achieving funding for transport projects. And I'd like to perhaps hear a little bit of how you think that you've, as a nation, been able to develop such a system where you can have good projects, what it takes to have good projects.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we are that good, but we're doing our best in the process, I would say. And it's like what you are saying with the priorities, that I think with this 12-year-long planning process we have in Sweden, which you were referring to, we start at a very base level with the dialogue, and it's all both municipality representatives, regional representatives, and it's knowledge-based, and we have all together with the transport agency, we work closely with the transport agency. So the better reports and background material we have, the better priorities our politicians can make. So I think it's to do with the process itself. And then, of course, it's not just being able to prioritize within our region, because, of course, the other regions have made, hopefully, their prioritizations also. But then it goes to the CEF Secretariat in Sweden, and then on top of that, of course, it's the government that decides. So I think it has to do a lot with the process itself, that it has to take time, and you have to have that long-term aim.
Yes.
So
and also, I understand that in Sweden, the ministry has a very strong coordinating role in bringing up the good projects and prioritizing as well.
Yeah, it's back to the dialogue. It starts from the municipality level, the regional level, and in our case, like I said, we are a very large portion of Sweden, so the better work we do together, and then of course the Ministry of Transport or Infrastructure every now and then invites to dialogue meetings, and the Transport Agency are active in different levels, regionally but also nationally. So I would say the process is quite open and transparent. So there's no project coming sort of from the side, just from nowhere. They are known projects and known bottlenecks. But of course, in the end, you have to have good arguments, because there's of course competition also within these really good projects.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, can I also add something why I think that Sweden has been so successful in this European funding, and I think we know the reasons also already quite well in Finland. One reason, of course, has been that Sweden has had big railway projects, and we haven't had in this corridor. It has been our only one European core corridor, this one from Turku to Helsinki and to Russian border.
Yes.
Now, in the next program, we will have another one from Helsinki to Oulu and Tornio also. It was upgraded also to be as a core corridor in the future. But we haven't had project in this core corridor, and that has been the reason. And of course, the other reason is that in Finland, we have had very short planning periods normally. Normally, always the Finnish government, every 4th year, it decides which one big transport projects they will do. And in Sweden, you have this 12 years planning. And now in Finland, we are also going for longer periods, because we know that if we want to take a part to European calls, it's important that we have also long period, and we are also committed to some transport projects after this governmental season. And I think these are the most important reasons why we haven't get funding from this European connecting facility. But we have been successful in the maritime sector, and the ports, they have been getting quite much funding anyway. And the reason is that we have been very committed in Finland to decarbonize the maritime sector, and we have get, I think, quite good amount of funding for these projects.
Yes, thank you very much. And exactly, the ports of Turku and ports of Mariehamn and Port of Stockholm have been very successful in having the funding for their improvement projects. Anyone else wishing to contribute at this point?
Maybe if I can say a few words, not maybe about the funding, but what I think which in Sweden especially has been really one of the sectors I see there has been huge added value while creating these kind of fast connections between big cities in Sweden, and you have the growth triangle in between kind of Malmö and Göteborg and Stockholm, and that's something we have been now starting to discuss here in Finland as well, that we should have this really emphasize or put investments to this growth triangle between capital area, Tampere and Turku area, and now we are speaking about these fast connections, and we could be even one metropole area within this whole triangle if we are managing to do this in the right way, which would be then really a global level center for growth, and I think that would be a huge advantage for the whole Finland.
Thank you. Anyone else want to reflect on the issues discussed before we go to the viestiseinä, the questions from the audience?
Okay, do we have this one? Is this? It's working. Thank you. We're just checking up a few, not very many critical comments, but there are actually a few.
Don't take the critical ones, take the nice ones.
I think you have to sell your ideas.
Yes.
The first one is actually about that, does we really get advantages from this so-called tunnelina or the fast connection? This is one, and what are they? The other is why don't we talk about a tunnel and bridge combination between Turku and Stockholm when we talk about this core network and having to cross the borders? Would that be the same thinking like Tallinn-Helsinki has been under discussion? And the third one is more directly to our EU representative. How will EU consider the fact that having an obsession by electrifying traffic, we actually create demand to burn the Amazonas? One major reason in Brazil is to be able to reach the minerals. So these three for now.
Who would like to start? And maybe with one of the first comments? I don't know.
Maybe I can start with the advantages of the 1 hour train, if there are really some, and why I state that there are. Well, I was mentioning already that we should actually really much put emphasis to how we can make the Finland get more advantage of the growth within this whole growth triangle area between capital area, Turku area, and Tampere, and that fast connections is definitely one of those. The second one is what I was mentioning when I was starting, is that this fast connection would combine 1.5 million people to be within one working area, which would be also a great advantage for the businesses, not only here in southwestern part of Finland, but also the capital area where the demand is also huge. And in order to create added value in companies, you need actually workers to do that, and skillful workers. And we know that in Finland especially, it's not very easy to move from one place to another after trying to find a job, but we'd like to stay in one place, and then while you have 1 hour connections, you can really create a wider working area. And the third one, which also been mentioned here a couple of times, is this, of course, climate change and how to diminish the CO2 emissions. And we know that traffic is one of the biggest sources of the CO2 emissions, which we should and we have to affect. But also, I would maybe not start this discussion, but Philip was also here in the beginning mentioning or stating that in Europe that you are actually nowadays using much more railway connections and putting effort to do fast connections between cities by rails and not so much the other means. So I think these three issues, the growth area, the connectivity and the labor market, and then the CO2 and climate change issues are the biggest ones.
Would anyone else want to reflect on that question?
Yes, I could maybe say something about the Amazon fires and the climate change and transport and electrification of transport. The people who are criticizing the electric vehicles that they are not sustainable, I think they are right. It's not sustainable, the industry now. And that's the reason why European Commission was putting forward an initiative about 2 years ago that we want to have totally European battery value chain. It means that we have to have the mining industry here in Europe, and Finland has very, very good opportunities here because Finland is the only country where we have all these minerals and metals, in fact, in Finland. And we want to also produce the batteries here in Europe, and we want to reuse them here, and we want to have totally European value chain in battery industry. And I think it's very, very important because we know that electrification will be one of the most important solutions to cut the emissions in transport sector. But many, many other possibilities has to be used also because we know that the challenges are so huge. And if we want to cut emissions now very, very fast, it means that renewable biofuels are very, very good solution for that, because we can put them to current vehicles. And it will take time before we have electric vehicles for everybody. And there's, of course, challenges in Finland where we have a cold climate and long distances and so on. But I think electrification of transport, it will come more and more popular all the time. And in the cities, it's a very good solution. And also maybe after some decades, also in the rural areas. But before that, it means that our battery industry has to be sustainable. And it's not now, because Europe is totally dependent on Asian minerals and metals and battery industry now. So that's why we are investing in European level very much to sustainable battery industry. And Finland has very, very good opportunities to be one of the key players there.
Thank you. And also, I think, from the ministry, and then from
yes,
the
just a
Commission.
short comment on the question on how to reflect on how to evaluate if a project is good or not, and what kind of project should be chosen. I think the question is not what is, or it's a difficult question to say what is a good project, but it's more difficult question to decide which is the best project. The resources are scarce. So I think that what we need is a common criteria and common way to evaluate different projects and their effects on first of all the sustainability, secondly the safety of transport system, and thirdly the economics and the accessibility of different places. And I think that the momentum is now, when we do our 12-year plan, to decide what we want to get out of the money that we put into the developing projects. And this is really important in order if we want to make something that creates our economy as a whole. And I think that one key issue has also been why we haven't been able to invest to transport investments and new projects is that we have had almost the majority of our money has gone to maintaining the current network. And this has been a problem that we don't have state budgetary funds to put more money into the new projects that is needed by the citizens and the businesses. And one key issue of the effects that relates to the effect, you can get more effect from a project depending on how it is financed. So the financial base, who finances the project, might make a difference to the effect of that project. So this is something that we also looked at when we did the guiding or steering paper in a parliamentary committee last February, that the need for new business model that make the use of funds outside of the budgetary funds is needed.
Exactly.
Just to complement on some of the aspects that were mentioned, on the electrification of transport, I would underline that electrification does not necessarily mean only batteries. Electrification of transport in general means also catenaries for railways. When it comes to maritime transport, it will not mean batteries, because this will not be the way forward. In public transport, there are buses which do not necessarily need batteries because they are charged at the different stations, etc. So there are also solutions beyond batteries when we speak about electrification. And additionally, I would complement that we are not obsessed by electrification. On the contrary, we always very keen to underline that we are technology neutral. That is our code word to say that we are not favoring one solution over the other. Nobody is in a position today to say this is the only solution and we only strive for this now. So there are many alternatives which are tested in pilots and so on, hydrogen and others. So I think we still have to find the best way, but not taking any action is not an option. Then on the project itself, and I've seen also there was a reference to the critical report of the Court of Auditors on high speed. It is true that not every project that has been carried out in the past has been fully successful, but I think a lot of lessons have been learned already, and there are ways and certainly models to be inspired from on how to assess the impacts of a project. We always speak about the socio-economic cost-benefit analysis, so when you plan a project, you should assess all the effects and see what is the outcome and what are the consequences on the society, on economy, on environment, etc. And then you take a decision and you design the project to the needs which are really there. So I think here also we can help from European side in providing some guidance and some good practice that has been applied elsewhere.
Thank you. Anyone else? Maria from Stockholm?
Yes, perhaps I could reflect a little bit about the. You looked at me when you said the Stockholm. Yeah, I noticed. But well, I haven't really heard anyone push for the tunnel between Åbo and. Yes, that's what I was going to say. The only.
But nobody would object, I would say.
No, nobody would object. But Hyperloop would be the one that would be sort of visionary, perhaps. But in general, I would say that there is a big interest for the cross-national connections in all different ways. So, of course, here we have the flights and the passenger traffic with 12 million passengers passing through every year. But also, if we talk about our sister organizations, we also have sister organizations in other directions. So I'm just mentioning the Oslo region, which also is also kind of a sister organization, and where a lot of people in that direction are striving for better railway connections between Stockholm and Oslo, of course, looking at the bigger labor market. And then looking at the south, of course, we have between Malmö and Copenhagen, we have one connection, but there are always discussions on could we extend to more railway connections between Malmö and Copenhagen. And then, of course, we have the Fehmarn Belt, which has been decided, but will also connect our northern part of Europe in a stronger way using the railway. So I think it's a relevant idea. And then, of course, it's back to financing, of course, and many other aspects. But I think I like the idea of connecting our countries stronger together.
Exactly, and this is, if we are talking about improving the traffic connections, the transport connections, it's nothing as such. It's a means to an improved joint labor market, in fact, an improved economy, and improved ways to help our industry to thrive in the global economy. So, in fact, it's also an investment instead of just a burden. Investment to bring forth increased GDP, for instance, which we all like to see. Do we have some more questions from the audience, from the pad, or from people who are here present?
One more came, bringing us perhaps back to our region where we are right now. Just a second. How can the comprehensive TEN-T network strengthen this region where we are right now in practical terms, not just in the theory and in the planning phase, but how would you foresee, for example, from the DigiMove side, that how important is this? Or are we the island up in the north, for example?
No, for sure not. As I said, the objective we have is also to have accessibility of all regions. That is very important to us. Finland is, of course, in a specific situation, a Nordic country on the periphery, so to say. But it is very important to us that we still have these connections so that everyone can benefit of from the network effects. But we spoke about priorities. For sure now the core network is a priority by 2030, but we did not forget the comprehensive network. It has a different time horizon, which is 2050. But we foresee the same parameters, for instance, to make sure that while we are building this comprehensive network, we are not running into a situation where suddenly there are technical issues and still the trains, the trucks, etc. cannot smoothly use the whole of the network. So there are also different funds available for different means. The Connecting Europe facility we have discussed mostly today is focusing on the core network, but there are also instruments like Interreg funds or other cohesion funds that are used also for the comprehensive network. So this is also then for the member states individually to decide where they foresee to use their structural funds.
Okay, thank you. And then we have some questions from the audience. Here, you're next.
Yes, sorry, I sit down. I have a question here. I read it because my English is not so fluent, and I have two facts here before I ask the question. The facts, I think, you can deny them if you can. A European high-speed rail network, not a reality, but an ineffective patchwork. This is said in European Court of Auditors publications, a European high-speed rail network last year. The second fact, in Sweden, Professor Maria Börjesson in a study, SNS, in English says that can investments in transport infrastructure expand productivity and getting jobs? She concludes that investments in a long way pendling, moving a long way, this job, people from Helsinki to Turku, so she concludes that these investments have not such a good effect as investments in contact surfaces between working places in a neighborhood. The smaller area, better growth in economics, she says. And my question is, because we have in Finland already an existing 10T core network corridor, Turku-Karjaa-Helsinki. This route should in every case be immediately repaired. So the question, what are the efforts that our Finnish representatives in 10T and CEFT teams have financially done in order to get these existing routes repaired? Because this solution would mean in traveling time only 20 minutes compared to all new one. So why to build 2.4 million new railway to get 20 minutes time spare? That's what I wonder. And not to speak about the damages involved to climate and nature. Ecology does not begin from a ready-built railroad. So there are many climate damages before this new railroad would be ready.
Yes, thank you. I would say that was a critical comment and a critical question as well. Yes, I'm sure. Well, now we have very good experts to answer that critique as well. So let's see.
Thank you very much. I will first comment on the Court of Auditors report. Indeed, the Court of Auditor...
that might not be on.
Sorry?
Yes.
Oh, I'm holding it too far away. The Court of Auditor indeed issued a report with a very critical title. And the findings, as I said, point to the fact that certain investments which have been done in the past have not led to the results that were expected. Now you cannot conclude this for all the projects to start with. So it is not a conclusion that high-speed rail as such does not make sense. The Court of Auditors is saying rather that you have to be very careful how you invest the money, and you have to make better assessments on the needs and on the use of the future network and how it fits into a network. This is why the title refers to patchwork, because the approach that we have tried to implement with the 10T, which is really the network approach, where I said the benefits are even bigger if the whole of the network comes up to the standards. This has not yet been successfully applied, but because also we have the deadline of 2030. So in a way, the Court of Auditor was maybe a bit quick in assessing the situation now, as we are not yet there where we want to be in 2030, obviously. So what I would like to say about that is, as I said, there are methods to assess the impacts of infrastructure projects, and there are good examples that can be followed to carefully assess also the effects on the environment And of course, European legislation foresees that for all infrastructure projects, you have to do the environmental impact assessment to see what are the consequences, how you can avoid them, how you can mitigate them, etc., etc. And all this needs to be done for every project. And of course, if the conclusions are negative, then there will be no financing from our side for such a project. That is obvious. I think the rest was really more, I mean, okay, the question whether investment in short transport distances is more important than in long distances. I would say the one does not go without the other, and it's not the question whether or. We, of course, from European side, we look at the longer distances, in particular because we are looking at the cross-border effects, etc. But it does not mean that we neglect altogether the urban approach. And again, structural funds, for instance, are there to support also the traffic in urban areas. But this is exactly also one point we will look now deeper into. As was mentioned, we are currently reflecting on a revision of our TEN-T policy. So an evaluation is going on. We are looking how well did the law of 2013 work, what is missing, what has changed also, and urban issues will be one of the things we are looking into to see better how this dimension affects and feeds into the overall network and how the two can better link up. But I think it's not either or, we need both. That's for sure, but both have to be done in the best possible way, taking into account all the impacts and assessments.
My question was money for the existing network.
From the TEN-T side, if we would be able to finance the maintenance of existing, well, as I said, no, for the time being, our policy does not foresee a possibility to use the Connecting Europe facility for maintenance of existing infrastructure. This is...
It belongs to 10 framework already.
I know very well, but if you take the needs in terms of maintenance, for sure the EU budget would not be even able to leverage a significant amount of that. Because maintenance is always still a bigger budget, as was said here. Also in Finland, it has consumed most of the budget because there has been a lack of investment into maintenance in the past decades. So, legally speaking, for the time being, under the Connecting Europe facility, there's not a possibility to pay for maintenance of existing railways. But this is, as I said, part of the priority setting. What we are looking at is the missing links, the cross-border sections, etc. And the idea is, of course, with that money that we provide for that, we free up also national budgets, which then again can be used for maintenance or other purposes.
Would anyone else like to comment on the issue?
No, well, maybe I could just add about this short and long distance, how the balance between them. And of course, that we are in, for example, in Turku, developing our public transport system all the time. We are discussing about the future possible tram lines and how they should and could be connected within the national railways network. And nowadays we see all the time how these so-called MaaS services, mobility as a service services, are improving. They are developing all the time, and of course these should be all included while we are thinking about these fast connections between big cities. But I think most of the kind of those issues that we have advantages were already mentioned so many times, we won't repeat them again. But maybe also one thing which I'd like to add here is also how reliable the connectivity is also is very important for the businesses and for the people, that you have to be able to count on that when you are arriving somewhere, you have to know that you are arriving there within a couple of minutes, not within an hour or so.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just a really short comment. I agree what is said before, and the assessment of the effects is really important. As I said before, it's important to decide what are the goals, or what are we trying to achieve, and if it comes to funding, there needs to be consensus on what kind of projects we are funding and what kind of outcomes do we want. And that's a question of dialogue and cooperation to understand what are the different stakeholders' goals that they are trying to achieve. And another, maybe a concrete action is that there are urban planning agreements between biggest city areas in Finland, so Helsinki, Turku, Tampere, Oulu area. And these are one concrete place where the municipalities can decide together what kind of priorities they do in order to improve their inner connectivity and also their outer connectivity. And state is also a part of these negotiations, and we are taking, these negotiations are going as we speak, and we hope that the municipalities can find a common ground on what is the perspective for the future in that region.
Yes, you are referring to the MAL agreements, maankäyttö, asuminen, liikenne, just to be clear that the Finnish audience knows a little bit.
Maybe I would like to add. Anyway, something I just wanted to add about this, when we speak about cost and benefit analysis, I think it's very important that we should develop this analysis also, because, for example, now when we speak so much about the climate change, we don't have really good tools to assess also what is the impact to climate change, for example, with these projects. And then more when we are coming, for example, to urban areas, that what does it mean for jobs and growth and for people's everyday life. And I think that the Ministry of Transport has been working quite much with these assessments during the last years and tried to find more tools that how we could have a little bit better analysis when we are trying to see the cost and benefits. Because now I think it's not large enough now what we can find out in this.
Yes, thank you. I think we still have time for one question. I didn't see any more hands rising up, so at least one or two short ones.
Thank you for a very interesting theme and panel. My name is Anne Ranneli. I come from the city of Oulu, up in the north of Finland, and we have been discussing about TEN-T mainly in south of Finland.
Yes, that's the topic.
Yeah, I know. But I would like to remind that actually, thanks to the European Commission, we seem to have a good consensus with European Commission and European Parliament, because the north of Finland with north of Sweden and partly north of Norway was added to the proposal of core network. We are very pleased of that, but as said here before, I have to say that I'm a little bit worried, because as stated by Mrs. Virkkunen, we will not benefit from that concretely unless on the national level there is serious planning starting right now, because the new era is getting started, and to be able to have money, you need good plans. And in cities and regions, we are all very forward to have this main rail line starting from Helsinki all up to Oulu and crossing border to Sweden. But it's not much we can do. So I'm just wondering how long this consensus will take until we get to this phase of planning in order to really take the best out of the excellent proposal by the European Commission to create accessibility up to the north in the time era when also the Arctic questions and things around there is really hot topic as well.
And maybe just a comment to that analysis and a little bit of question you had as also that what you were describing.
I actually have also one question.
Yes, yeah. I would say that has also something to do with the connectivity and accessibility of southern Finland.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yes, it does. But this is out of curiosity. European Commission had this online consultation about this future of the networks. I'm wondering, what will you do with all these answers? I mean, I know that so many people from Finland and north of Finland has been consulted, and I'm wondering if our ministry will use these comments, because there's really many aspects with this Finland's TEN-T strategy about.
Thank you. I think that we already should be wrapping up, but maybe a short comment from anyone who'd like to say something?
As the question was very concrete, I will give a very concrete answer. So we will, of course, assess now all the contributions we have received. They are all public. We are all transparent about that. So everybody can consult the contributions of everybody, depending on the language knowledge, of course. And we are aiming to present still September, October, the first results of this public consultation. The evaluation process will go beyond that because we will dive into different topics and we will present normally May, June next year the substantial results. We have one big gathering, the 10T days, where we want to present already the outcome of the evaluation. And of course, based on that, we will take the next step then to a proposal to revise the legislation we have in place now.
Thank you. So it will be a challenging job, I agree, but we trust that the Commission will do their best to have a good solution based on all the very good suggestions. Now we have the one final question or comment, and very short, and then we'll wrap up because there are people queuing for the next part of the Eurooppa-foorumi in this location.
Thank you. Matti Vielane from the South Carolina Regional Council, Russian border. It was mentioned structural funds and this cohesion policy, because we have lack of money for these good investments. In Finnish programs in the southern Finland, it is not allowed. And I was very pleased to hear from the Commission that you would also see structural funds as a source of financing. Maybe small-scale infrastructure or planning, because the lack of money is the real problem. So please, if the European Parliament and Commission could also be in favor of using this money for transport planning systems and small-scale infrastructure investments also in Finland.
So there was some sort of question, I believe, to just a short
I'm not the
yes.
absolute expert on cohesion funds, because these are different colleagues in charge of that. But of course, the next financing period is prepared as well now. The operating plans are being set up in the member states, so the decisions are going to be taken, I suppose, also here in Finland, and it will be largely also a debate within Finland to see where the priorities are set.
Thank you. And now, well,
and
just
to say that there is also the decision of the government on how to develop regional areas is under preparation in accordance with the cabinet program.
Thank you. Well, now I have to wrap up. I'll have to close down this lively discussion. And I think I thank very much our esteemed panelists from Finland and from Sweden and from Belgium. And I hope you had enjoyed the discussion. And you can also continue commenting on Twitter as we spoke. And maybe some of you are also interested in the next panel or next program event that is taking place right here as well. Thank you very much. Thank you also to the home.